Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's really a delight to be here for the presentation of the second nominee of the UMAC Award 2021. Exciting projects that we have this year. And this second one couldn't be more exciting. And we have the Harvard Art Museums and the best of their team today here with us live. And Akiko Fukuno, the chair of the UMAC Award Committee, will be introducing, and I will join the conversation every now and again, but Akiko will moderate this presentation. Thank you so much, Akiko, and thank you everyone for being here. David and Laura and Molly. Thank you.
Okay.
Akiko?
Okay. Thank you, Marta. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening hi everyone. I am Akiko Fukuno, speaking from the International Christian University in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you, Marta, for providing this platform for the presentation session by finalists of the UMAC Award. So today we have David, Director of Academic and Public Programs, the DAPP, Division Head, and also Research Curator. And we have Laura, who is the Associate Director of the Academic and Public Programs. And she is the Louis Miller Bayer Research Curator. And Molly Ryan, who will be taking care of these slides, and the programs manager joining us for the presentation. So now we have, the floor is yours, and please get started with your presentation. I'm dying to hear the highlights of the project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akiko, and thank you, Marta, also and thank you to the committee for this nomination. We're so honored to be part of such a wonderful group of museums. What I'm going to do is basically just give you a very brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Laura and Molly, who will talk in more detail about the project. But for those of you who aren't familiar with our museum, the Harvard Art Museums is an academic art museum located in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the United States. We're part of Harvard University, and we want to acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Massachusetts people, and we strive to honor this relationship. As part of a major teaching and research institution, we have the great privilege of working with students and faculty from across a huge range of disciplines, as well as members of our local and regional communities and public audiences from around the world. So when the COVID-19 pandemic forced our temporary closure back in March 2020, which really seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it? The Division of Academic and Public Programs realized that we needed a plan to continue to fulfill our mission. So previously, we focused on in-person, small, seminar-like settings for most of our teaching, and even many of our programs, with the exception of things like exhibition openings and big lectures. So we'd actually been very reluctant to work in exclusively digital spaces. But we quickly understood that we had to completely reimagine the way we taught and how we programmed. In short, we had to reimagine our work. So out of this realization, the Pandemic Pivot Project emerged. And we created and implemented a digital strategy, a digital engagement strategy, in collaboration with colleagues and students to pivot from our in-person work to remote teaching and programming. So we created innovative digital content, virtual content, and in line with the university's standards of excellence. And we continue to experiment, implement, and evaluate meaningful ways to engage the Harvard Art Museum's public and academic audiences. So now I want to turn it over to my two colleagues. And first, Laura Muir will talk about our teaching projects, followed by Molly Ryan, who will discuss our program. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really pleased to have the chance to talk about our teaching during the pandemic. Although we had to change the way we worked with faculty and students, we continued to partner with departments from across the university, and we're very actively involved in online teaching. And here you see a screenshot from a class called Dark Satanic Mills, discussing a photograph in the collection of a young mill worker by Lewis Hine. So online teaching began almost immediately after the museum's closure. My colleague Jen Thum, who you see on the screen, and who's my close partner in all of the museum's academic engagement work, she and I worked very closely with faculty to shift all of the in-person visits that had been planned for the remainder of the semester to virtual visits on Zoom. And we learned a lot during that process. So building on that experience, over the summer, last summer, we organized a series of interactive online workshops for faculty and graduate students on how to teach remotely with museums' collections. And the aim of these workshops was to introduce faculty, many of whom had never worked with us before, to the museums, its collections, and staff as a resource, to share strategies for looking and engaging with works of art. How do you translate this to the virtual space? And to share some tips on teaching with objects and images online, including Zoom-specific tips and tricks that had been successful. We modeled 3 different approaches with 3 very different types of objects from the Harvard Art Museum's collections, which had been used online in real classes in the spring. And it was just a really rewarding experience and led to many partnerships that fall. But also over the summer, over the course of the whole year, we really, out of necessity, had to lean into our digital resources. So over the summer, we began to develop a series of collections-based teaching tools, which took advantage of an existing feature on our website and our collection database. And fortunately, most of our collections already had good digital images. So the first that we developed was called COVID in the Collections. And here you see a screenshot from our website. It's a selection of about 100 objects spanning cultures and time periods relating to disease and pandemics. And we compiled this as a resource for faculty teaching courses inspired by or related to the COVID-19 crisis. We then created selections from the collections related to other topics, such as African American history and the Latinx experience. And we shared these with faculty, and they are accessible on our website now. So although we did a lot of outreach, faculty were also reaching out to us to collaborate, especially during the pandemic. Teaching remotely sent more people our way than you might expect, because faculty were looking for ways to make their online teaching more exciting, more pedagogically diverse, and to give their students different kinds of sources to learn from. In addition to our traditional partners in the history of art and architecture, we were working with departments like mind, brain, and behavior, earth and planetary sciences, and the Harvard Business School, which you might not expect. And here is a list of titles of the Harvard courses that we worked with during the fall of 2020, where museum staff provided guest lectures. And the next slide is a list of the 30 courses that used our collections in teaching in spring 2021. And this list gives you just a sense of the range of subjects. And I'd now like to quickly just share a couple of examples with you. So the first was a session that we did for one of the many courses we worked with related to health. This is Karen Thornburg's Disease, Illness, and Health Through Literature. For this class, students chose the works of art that we looked at using our collections database, but also the COVID in the Collections resource. And here you see one of our curators, Susanna Ebbinghaus, giving the whole class a close look at a grave stele of a woman dying in childbirth. We then looked at additional works in smaller groups in breakout rooms, which we're all very familiar with now after this year, including this incredible detail-rich print by contemporary artist and physician Eric Avery on the left, and a public health poster from 1903 on the right. And over the past year, we had numerous opportunities to address the pandemic and other health-related issues through our collections. We're often engaging with timely contemporary issues at the museums. And this was also the case with Professor Shai Dromi's tutorial on sociological theory. This was a course that critiqued the canon in sociology, and we found parallels to this institutional critique with the work of artist Alexandria Bell, who highlighted and redacted portions of the daily news coverage of the Central Park 5 case from the 1980s to expose its racism in a series of 20 prints that we acquired last year. And you see just one of them on your screen here. We also looked at works by Fred Wilson and Carrie James Marshall, both of whom interrogate who belongs and who is represented in museums. And finally, Professor Giovanni Bazzana's Stories from the End of the World, which we all call the Apocalypse class. We first worked with this class in 2019, and back then it was already the largest class that we had ever worked with 150 students. And online, it was even more popular. 431 students attended a virtual museum visit for this class. And here you see my colleague Cameron Mani talking about a painting by Jackson Pollock, which was in part a response to the nuclear age. And we used this painting as part of a flipped classroom experience where students had a chance to study high resolution images of the work ahead of time and then came prepared to discuss it in class. And we had a really lively conversation, as you can see in the chat. And here's one of our graduate fellows, Sophie Linford, zooming in on Botticelli's Mystic Crucifixion and Apocalyptic Vision of Florence. And to see details that otherwise would have been really hard to make out even in person. So, and despite the enormous size of this class, by using different tools and teaching strategies, we were able to make sure that every student had a chance to look closely, to engage in small group discussion and have their voice heard. So this was such an exciting collaboration that we really wanted to share it more broadly. Our teaching, which is happening all the time, is usually invisible to our public, especially when we're closed. So this spring, we hosted an online program with Professor Bazzana that provided a glimpse into this course and the role that the collections had played. And we look forward to finding more ways to give our academic work a more public face. And that is a good segue to Molly, who will talk about our public programs.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Ryan. I'm the programs manager at the Harvard Art Museums. And I'm so glad to have so many of you joining us this evening to hear about the Pandemic Pivot Project. And I'm going to talk today about public programs. So in my role at the Harvard Art Museums, I oversee our robust calendar of public programs and work with colleagues across the museums, on campus, and beyond to develop innovative programs that engage a broad public audience. Now, usually this involves activating museum spaces through lectures, workshops, seminars, film screening, performances, and more. But over the past year, like many of you, it has involved a lot of Zoom, specifically Zoom webinars. I'm excited to have a few minutes to share how our public programming has been transformed by this year and how we hope we and others might carry forward this work in the future. So I want to start by sharing just a few big picture takeaways from this time. One is that online programs have given us the ability to reach an expanded global audience. Programs once designed to reach 15 people in our galleries have regularly attracted audiences of 300 to 500 people, while some of our virtual lectures have attracted over 1,200 people, which is more than 4 times the maximum capacity of our physical space. Online programs have also reduced barriers to participation. In addition to allowing us to share our programs with people physically located around the world, the online format has alleviated challenges around transportation, parking, ticketing, timing, and capacity issues that are sometimes a barrier to participation. Online programs have created better channels of communication with our audiences. Through registration platforms, we are able to more effectively drive people to our newsletters, collect survey data, and direct people to additional resources available online. And finally, online programming brought the museums into people's homes rather than people to the museum. This feels like a significant shift in our work and has inspired us to think more critically about the responsibility of a museum beyond its walls moving forward. So now I want to spend the next few minutes sharing some of our specific programming strategies from this pandemic year, and to start with our student guides. So student guides were at the vanguard in our shift to online programming, and they were really uniquely prepared to adapt to the virtual format. While other staff were more wary, our student cohort brought technological savvy and innovative ideas that allowed us to almost seamlessly adapt their in-person tours for Zoom. And I'm sharing with you a photo montage of selfies that were designed to promote our student guide tours on our web calendar this year, which hopefully gives you a sense of the personality and creativity of our students. So starting in April 2020, we offered 2 to 3 virtual student guide tours per week. Tours were 30 minutes each, presented live on Zoom, and designed to be interactive. Each unique tour explored a theme or idea using works from the collections and invited participants to make observations, ask questions, and share ideas throughout. In addition to their weekly tours, over the course of the year, student guides also worked together to create innovative projects for social media and to experiment with new tour formats. And I'm showing you here just 2 examples, a makeup tutorial in which Cecilia Zhao recreated 3 works from the collection, a video that was later picked up by the Met, and a guide chat where Paul Tamboro and his grandmother recreated Renoir's Spring Bouquet from her garden in Connecticut. Inspired by the protests happening across the country, students also adapted their tours to address topics of social justice and foreground the work of BIPOC artists. And I invite you to please visit at Harvard Art Happens on Instagram and Facebook for much more from our student guides. Above all, during the pandemic, students had more agency than they typically do in our museum spaces. Digital platforms offered a way to be more nimble, playful, and innovative, which is what our public audiences are asking from us and where our students really shined. As you can imagine, we learned a lot from us working with our students in these early days and soon felt empowered to adapt 2 of our signature programs to the online format. Beginning in May 2020, our in-person Art Study Center seminars became Art Study Center seminars at home. And in July 2020, our usual gallery talk series transformed into Art Talks Live. In our at-home seminars, we doubled down on the idea of inviting participants into the research process. Using digital images, we could zoom in on a detail in a work of art, see the backside of a work or a frame, show conservation treatment images, and even share making and material investigations. We were hoping to maintain some of the intimacy of our in-person sessions, and were somewhat surprised to discover how well we were able to invite participants behind the microscope, beneath the surface, and into the lab through the online format. And I'm showing you here a slide from a seminar offered by my brilliant colleagues Sophie Linford and Ruby Auburn, which highlighted their collaborative research to reconstruct the creative process of British artist Albert Muir. In our Art Talks Live series, we focused on drawing out the complex stories of a single work of art. These short programs were designed to empower the visitors to see differently and more deeply on the next time they visit, whether by understanding the larger story behind a work, noticing a new detail, or having a new set of questions to guide their looking. At each program, participants had a chance to ask questions and offer comments in a Q&A box, which for me highlighted the exciting diversity of our audience, which ranges from ordinary art lovers to subject area expertise. I should note that when offered on site, these programs were restricted to 15 participants, but on Zoom, we've regularly welcomed 200 to 600 people for each talk. And through these series, we were better able to demonstrate that the museums are not a static place, and to better show how what we know is always changing. This year, because our work could no longer focus on what was on view in our galleries, which had previously been a fundamental organizing principle, we took the opportunity to step back to catalyze conversation about the role of museums in our wider world. Rather than positioning ourselves as the experts, we designed programs that created space to bring people together to think in public. And just to briefly highlight a few examples, In fall 2020, we presented a conversation on voting, activism, and art in collaboration with the Harvard Votes Challenge. Also in fall 2020, we focused our Art Talk series on the theme of power dynamics and challenged our curatorial team to explore how artists engage with social and political crises and use art to upset systems of power. Finally, in spring 2020, we presented a conversation called Troubling Images, Curating Historic Photography Collections. And you can see that David was one of our participants, which explored the challenges and possibilities of curating collections that include photographs of colonial violence, enslaved subjects, racist stereotypes, and other difficult imagery. And you can find video recordings of all of these programs on our YouTube channel. At a time when we weren't allowed to convene in the usual ways, our virtual public programs effectively served as social spaces and as a place where academic and public audiences could meaningfully intersect. Our ability to use the online format over the past year to be nimble and responsive to pressing issues in our world has created new potential for the museums to serve as a site for dialogue for our diverse communities. And this is something that will be central to our ongoing Reframe initiative, which will transform our galleries beginning this fall. And finally, I want to close by sharing just a few words about our year-long partnership with the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, which quite literally brought to life our special exhibition, Painting Edo, Japanese Art from the Feinberg Collection. The exhibition was on view for just 4 short weeks before the pandemic closure. And as we began to reimagine our public engagement efforts, we were inspired to reach beyond our walls to partner with the Arnold Arboretum, Harvard's remarkable museum of trees. The Arnold Arboretum was one of very few spaces that people could safely be during the pandemic. And this partnership became a way to encourage curiosity, exploration, and close looking while our doors were closed. The collaboration was comprised of 3 major initiatives: Painting Edo at the Arnold Arboretum, a series of live programs that explored the painted plants in our exhibition and their living counterparts at the Arnold Arboretum; Haiku and You, a social media campaign and workshop series that offered the opportunity to find community and connect with art and nature through haiku; and finally, Planting Edo, a digital field guide publication which highlighted key poetic and botanical features of the plants in the Painting Edo exhibition. The partnership was an amazing opportunity for cross-pollination and resulted in significant audience exchange and increased newsletter signups for both institutions. And for me, Painting Edo and the Arnold Arboretum was emblematic of what a university museum can be. It foregrounded how new knowledge and understanding can be created through interdisciplinary exchange, how collections can be brought to life through collaboration, and how art made long ago can inspire new creative communities today. To date, we've hosted approximately 161 virtual programs for over 23,000 people tuning in from across the country and around the world. And I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Jean Burke, who helped crunch this data and these numbers earlier this week. Our galleries will reopen on September 4th, but we will continue offering virtual programs through December 31st, 2021. And I just want to conclude by saying that it feels like online programs are here to stay, and that the work of the next little while will be figuring out what of this time we can sustain and carry forward. So thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to turn things over to David.
Great, thank you so much, Molly, and thank you, Laura. I just want to say a few words in conclusion, and of course, if there are any questions, we're happy to take them. But as a university museum with a public footprint, I think the Pandemic Pivot project has really enabled us to kind of continue to contribute to the university community and to our public audiences. So by adopting innovative approaches to providing access to the collections and to the work of our staff and students, this project has really enabled us to really just to continue working in spite of the complicated situation brought on by the temporary closure of the museum and just the general chaos and difficulties brought on by the global pandemic. But what this project allowed us to do was really actually forced us to do was take full advantage of technology to enhance our teaching practices, doing things remotely, but nevertheless remaining connected to the Harvard curriculum, thinking about interdisciplinary teaching and learning, and thinking again about public audiences. So all the best of what an academic museum can do. I'm very happy to I would be very happy for us to take any questions, and also look forward to collaborating with colleagues across the world to continue this work into the future.
Okay. Thank you very much. You have a great team, and congratulations.
We're really fortunate.
Congratulations. It's amazing that you have such a rich variety of, resourceful materials which can be used by students, faculty around the world, not only by academia, but also by just everyone.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And I have a couple of questions, maybe just to get started.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, things like this don't happen overnight. I'm sure that you had a lot of work to do. And now, I'm sure that you face a lot of challenges and face problems. Maybe you could share us some of your challenges. And my next question is, now, what is your next project? This is digital.
Sure, and I invite Laura and Molly to jump in here as well, but I'll say, Akiko, it felt like it was overnight, actually, because everything, if you can remember back to March of 2020, it just seemed to happen all of a sudden, really. And in terms of, the kind of university situation, we weren't really sure if how long we were going to remain open, when we were going to close. So it really did feel very rushed. And I think in moments like that, and certainly in this case, what we did was really draw on kind of many years of preparation for in-person work. And we really, the hardest thing was to think about how to translate that and transform that to the virtual format, and rather than simply trying to slap something on Zoom, really. And so that's what we really did to prepare, was really thinking about that transformation process. And I think for me, the most difficult thing conceptually was moving from this kind of very intimate, small space where we thought the power of the art was really in that very small physical space in person, and accepting that there are other ways of having a wonderful, wonderful experience with the collections. Laura, maybe you want to add to that, or Molly?
I would just say, I would say the challenge initially was just getting comfortable with the technology. I mean, especially for an older person like myself, I wasn't.
Some of us of a certain generation, yeah.
Yeah, it was intimidating, but yeah, I think we just really embraced it. And as David said, over the years, we had been photographing our collection, and I think the pandemic made us realize that we actually had all these resources that had been underutilized. And so it was this incredible opportunity to use this material, think about it more creatively. So I think it was really a great chance to kind of tap into a lot of things we didn't really even realize we had. And I think going forward, some of the things we learned or found out that we could do, for example, like this enormous class with almost 500 students, I think we could still do virtual visits for huge classes like that, but also have the in-person, intimate in-person visits that we'll be able to return to.
That's actually what I was going to ask you. Well, first of all, I loved it. I think it's great, and it's so comprehensive. So the scope of it. You did so many different things, and covering teaching and the public and so on. I wanted to know, this is a whole package, of course, but okay, now everyone is vaccinated in Massachusetts, certainly, not the US, but anyway. Well, that's another story. But anyway, what I wanted to say is, now life is coming back to normal, right? So what are you going to keep? Did you decide? Did you discuss? What are you going to keep of the whole package? Now that people can go back to in-person classes, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to just toss it? What's going to happen?
Marta, we are absolutely not going to just toss it. I mean, I think I started this job with black hair, and it's definitely no longer black. So I'll say that I think, all these challenges really on the positive side, I mean, we've learned so much because of them. And so I think that the question really for our next project really is almost more of an adaptation as opposed to something totally new. So it's really about what does a hybrid environment for teaching and
Right.
programming look like? And so I don't know, maybe Molly, would you like to say a little bit about this possibility of hybrid programs?
Sure,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think one big question that we all have is like, are we ever going to want to be on Zoom again after this? And I think partially that's one of the things we have to be responsive to in public programming specifically. Like in some ways, the joy of public programs is being in space with people to like hear an interesting thing or learn about something new. But there are all these benefits of the Zoom universe that we've talked about today. And one concern for us always with questions of like filming or photography when we're doing things in person is just the ways that those can disrupt the experience of the people who are in the room. So what I think we'll look for is opportunities to create virtual access to things like our lecture
Right.
programs, like our larger scale offerings where we could live stream in an undisruptive way. And that might even be possible on small scales, like an iPhone in the gallery. Could we YouTube live for a gallery talk? But I think one other sort of space that we're thinking about is how can we remind ourselves to use some of the content and the ideas and the thinking that's happening for in-person programs and make use of it digitally more intentionally. So
Right.
if it's an in-person gallery talk, could they also record a 10-minute version of that we publish online? And then someone who's across the world can then sort of participate in that way. So
Right.
have it all figured out yet. Partially, we have to figure out how to be in the museum again and how to bring people back into the museum, which is the work of the next little while. And an important reason that we're sort of keeping our programming virtual for the fall term. But there's lots of potential directions. And I think one other challenge is like, how do we keep doing this and go back to doing all the things we were busy with before?
Of course.
So clearly we can double our staff, right? I'm sure that's in the budget.
For example, but this experience, the interdisciplinary experiences, were they familiar to you? I mean, the business school, the Arboretum, did you usually work with them, or was it, the pandemic that brought everyone together? How did it
So
work?
it's a great question, Marta, because it's actually a little bit of both, right? So building on the philosophy and the principle of interdisciplinary collaboration meant that we had no trouble working with new partners during this period, but the pandemic definitely accelerated certain partnerships, I think. But again, as I think we've all said, this notion of working in an interdisciplinary environment as an academic museum, that is what is the strength of our institutions, I think, that make us such nimble and I think important contributors at a moment like this in our history. And I think in our case, building on these relationships that we have developed over the years really made it possible to move quickly. But without that deep work over a long period of time, across disciplines, like it wouldn't have worked so well.
No, that's right. And what about the problem with Harvard is that it's rich, right? So imagine, and you had this incredible work already done of, collections online, super high definition that you could, you could play with them and learn from them. But many university museums, they figured out recently with the pandemic that they were totally unprepared, to take this digital sphere a bit further. What kind of advice would you have for smaller university museums in other places, for example, Africa, South America, for example, Asia, that don't have access to the
That's a very
collections. Yeah, and
yeah, it's
also
a
the
very
people,
fair,
the
yeah,
audiences. The audiences don't have access to the
right.
digital tools.
Absolutely. No, it's a very fair point, very good question. And I think, the reality is, of course, having this tremendous set of objects, first of all, and having already very high quality digital images just made our life so much easier, made our work so much easier than it could have been.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is that although it will take resources, there's no way around it. But even having smartphones, inexpensive camera equipment, and of course, internet access, which is a great global divide there. So that we have to recognize that. But having even kind of the inexpensive versions of this technology and a certain amount of access to internet resources, I think the rest of it is creativity. Because what we found that, if you think about it, practically the whole world was using Zoom or YouTube or these virtual formats.
Absolutely.
And right, and
Absolutely.
we're all, so many of us anyway are using smartphone technology. These are not massive investments from a university museum
No.
standpoint, right?
And
So
everyone has a phone, and everyone
everyone
has
has
a
a phone.
phone. That's true.
Absolutely.
So
And I
if we
think
could bring this together, right?
yeah, and to not let the idea of needing the absolute highest quality or highest
Right.
resolution images stand in the way of the incredible talent and intelligence that is everywhere around the planet. And I think that's what also another thing that we learned really, that we didn't need fancy bells and whistles for absolutely everything. And that a lot of the time, we wanted specific objects and we didn't have good images of them. And we just one of our colleagues went in and took a picture and we used that. And so not everything was as beautiful as the examples we chose to show you. So I think that's
because we're
lesson.
not television producers, right?
Absolutely.
And it makes us humans in a way,
Exactly.
to make all those mistakes and, and the camera and the video, this and that, and the sound is not so good.
We have made so many mistakes on Zoom. It's not even funny.
It's amazing because, museums are more about that too, how the engagement. So that's very good.
And I think especially from a university museum point of view, right, that connection to teaching and the ability to teach live in spite of the health conditions, I think has just been remarkable. And also I'll just add the potential for us to collaborate across these divides of technology and wealth and time difference and all that. I think, again, yes, we're speaking from a position of great resources, but, we can all get on Zoom and talk to each other and share lessons to help each other out.
Yeah, and that's what actually one of the purposes of the UMAC Award is to, give, highlight, give voice, give visibility to single projects that other museums all over the world can adapt, multiply, copy, and so on, and do in their own contexts and situations. So this is fantastic. And the way you approached it, I find the comprehensiveness of it absolutely fantastic and so well done.
Oh, thank you so much.
No, thank you. We don't know Akiko knows who won, but I don't. So I wish you the best of lucks because you deserve to be recognized by the work you've done and so on. Akiko, there are no questions. Akiko, there are no questions. Do you still have questions?
No, I should say thank you for the inspiration. We will add our creativity to our new projects. And
Akiko, you liked the haikus and the Edo thing especially, right?
Of course, actually.
I'm amazed you don't have questions about that.
No, I do. Actually, one of the professors at our university, who's actually a Harvard graduate, suggested that we do something, similar to the Edo painting. Yes.
Oh dear.
I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Really great,
Yeah.
You see, that's the dynamics of the UMAC Award. Fantastic. That's very good.
Yep.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Molly, David, Laura, thank you. Akiko, as usual,
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you,
And
Martha.
yeah, and best of lucks. And we see each other. I hope in person or not, doesn't matter. But yeah, we'll see each other soon. Thank you so much also for
Okay.
everyone watching.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.